Mr. Speaker, turn to page 8 of the calendar and Senate Bill 1466, a bill to amend the Code of Virginia relating to water and waste authorities, liens. Report from county, cities, and towns on February 18th. No amendment.
Anybody prepared to handle? Gentleman from Warren, Mr. Athey.
Mr. Speaker, what Senate Bill 1466 does, and I guess it has some controversy around it, so I'll explain it as best I can. A few years ago, we allowed localities to place liens on people's property if they didn't pay their water and sewer bill. And needless to say, that all worked fine, except in the context of where you were a landlord and you owned the real estate, and your tenant signed up for the water and sewer agreement, but then the tenant didn't pay the water and sewer agreement, and then they went in and put a lien on your property as the owner of the rental property. And what this bill seeks to do, which I understand the localities are against, of course, is it seeks to say that you cannot do that in that situation unless you get them up front to agree in writing, the landlord, the owner of the property, to agree in writing that this was okay to, that this lien would be applicable to that particular piece of property. So I believe it's a good bill, and I think it protects a class of people that we should, and therefore I'd ask that the body pass the bill.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Boulevard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, we've had a number of bills dealing with liens and water and sewer authorities this session. I actually had one, and I know a lot of them dealt with very, very legitimate concerns. The delegate from Hopewell, Delegate Ingram, I think worked very, very hard with stakeholders to come up with what I thought was a very good compromise moving forward that addressed a lot of the situations involved. That was House Bill 2425. And I supported that. It passed the House, and it also passed the other body. In addition to that, the Housing Commission has been tasked with looking at the whole issue of liens and water authorities and renters from a comprehensive standpoint over the next year, so we can think about how all this works in tandem. That said, the proposed changes here, while it deals with those same kind of issues, has some very significant consequences, not only for localities and the utilities, but I also believe for many of our constituents. Currently, under the code, in order to be able to put a lien on a property for non-payment of a rental, you have to provide upfront notice. And a lot of what Delegate Ingram's bill did was to ensure that that notice was provided and the landowner, the property owner, knew that that was going to take place. Under this bill, it requires that you actually have a written agreement between both parties. And I hope you'll think about the consequences of those kind of actions. Number one, it creates an entirely new bureaucracy. And so think about the process of a large utility like Fairfax County Water Authority that has tens of thousands of customers. Many of those are renters. And now they're going to have to go back and forth and actually develop and make sure they have these contracts that are signed. The other thing is the significant inconvenience to renters, because the water authorities are going to make sure that they have these agreements. And so unless they can get those and until they get those worked out, you're not going to have any water available for those rental folks. All of this means that you're going to have increased bureaucracy, and all of that means you're going to have increased costs to those tenants and the overhead. Again, this is an issue. I agree these are important, but the Housing Commission is actually looking at this. I think as a temporary stopgap, we got a very good bill that's already in place that Delegate Ingram has put forward, and I ask please just let the process move forward as it is so we can have good comprehensive recommendations and not go ahead and have unintended consequences. I hope you'll vote against this bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Gloucester, Mr. Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It seems to me that this bill can get into a lot of mischief because the authority may sign an agreement with the property owner today, and 5 years from now, that agreement is still there, but the owner may have had several different tenants in the interim. And if a tenant leaves the owner without paying his rent, and also the utility, as well as perhaps the power company and the others, that's going to put the owner of the property in a terrible position. And it seems to me it's not something that the owner should have to be responsible for. So I just do not see it, the merit of this bill at all. I would hope that you'll defeat the bill.
Gentleman from Hopewell, Mr. Ingram.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is a very simple bill. If you feel that the landlord should put a lien against his property because of a tenant that does not pay the water bill, then vote against this bill. But if you feel like I feel that if the owner of a property, and it's even in the law, we cannot even go on in that property as an owner of the property unless we give the person notice, okay? But yet they can put a lien against that real estate property because of the tenant not paying a bill. So it's very simple. If you feel like that the owner of the property should be involved in the real estate and have a lien against there for nothing, then vote against the bill. But if you feel that that the tenant is responsible for that water bill, then you vote for this bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Henrico, Ms. Morrissey.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Hopewell answered my question.
The gentleman from Chesapeake, Mr. Cosgrove.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I hope that you'll reject this measure. If you read the bill, it really does say that every lease that is let has to have a written authorization between the authority and the property owner. Not just once, but every time the tenant changes. And this is going to really cause an awful lot of difficulty for a lot of people. In Northern Virginia, it can affect tens of thousands of people. Just in my city, literally thousands of rental units. So the other thing is, Mr. Speaker, we are going to be looking at this in the Housing Commission. I think this bill is a little ahead of its time. I hope we reject the measure. Thank you.
Gentleman from Henry, Mr. Armstrong.
Speaking to the bill,
Gentleman has the floor.
I want to associate myself with the remarks made by my good friend, the gentleman from Hopewell. To me, I mean, I'm putting myself in the landlord's position. If I rent this property to somebody and they run up a water bill, why should I have to pay for that? They're the ones that got the water, and they're the ones that owe the money. And so why shouldn't they be the ones to pay for it, not the landowner? And so why would I not want to vote for this if I believed in that?
Mr. Speaker. Will the gentleman yield for a question?
Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Bulova. Gentleman from Fairfax, Mr. Bulova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The gentleman yield for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
I yield to my former roommate.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the gentleman agree, though, that this bill doesn't change the premise of whether you can hold a landlord accountable for that renter's failure to go ahead and pay for a water or sewer bill, and that it doesn't do anything with that regard, but it does make the administrative process much more cumbersome and burdensome?
Well, I would admit to the gentleman that I don't know that my knowledge of the intricacies of this bill go all that deep. I do know that it probably helps out the landlords a little bit, and that's maybe as far as it can go.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay.
Gentleman from Dickinson, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The issue is not as clear as some would like for you to believe in terms of the real issue here. The real issue is who's going to pay for the delinquent water bill. It's going to be the other ratepayers. The other ratepayers, if you have a water bill that's not paid and that accumulates over a period of time, who's going to pay for it? It's going to be the moms and pops, the other landowners who pay their bills, and the rates are going to go up to make up for the delinquent bills. That's clearly what's going to happen here. So the question is going to be who pays? Is it the ratepayers, the homeowners who pay their bills on time, the moms and pops who pay their bills on time? They're the ones who end up paying these bills because, in the end, the authorities, the water authorities, the towns and cities have to make up this money somewhere. And the money is going to be made up from the rest of the ratepayers. So I would oppose the bill. I'd ask that you vote against it and leave it as it is and let the commission, the study, determine whether or not this is a feasible and right way to do it.
The gentleman from Rockingham, Mr. Wilt.
Move the pending question.
I thought we went over that last night. The gentleman from Rockingham moves the pending questions. Those in favor of that motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Pending questions called for. Shall the bill pass? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 18, noes 80.
Ayes 18, noes 80. The bill fails to pass.